love it.
Hey everybody, Dave Karger here in the Today Show Green Room. I am the Oscars and Golden Globes expert for the Today Show, which means that every year for the last 16 years, I've come here to the show to be grilled by Matt and Savannah on who's gonna win the Oscars and the Golden Globes. Well, guess what? I am turning the tables today because I am here with Noah Oppenheim. Noah is not only the executive producer of the Today Show, but he's also the guy who wrote the screenplay for the movie Jackie, starring Natalie Portman as Jackie Kennedy. This is a movie that's already received the Spirit Award nomination for Best Feature. Natalie Portman is at the forefront of the overall Best Actress race for her performance, and Noah himself won the Best Screenplay prize at the Venice Film Festival. So congratulations.
Thank you so much.
And it's great to see you.
It's great to see you too. Funny bumping into you here.
I know, I like it. Let me start by asking you this. Which of these three words best describes how you felt about Jackie Kennedy before you wrote this movie? Would you say interest, fascination, or obsession?
I would say fascination, because obsession feels like I should be committed to an institution of some kind. But no, I was deeply fascinated by her from the time I was a little kid. I have vivid memories of going to my grandmother's house and finding in my mother's bedroom a box full of old newspapers and magazines from that week in 1963 when President Kennedy was killed. My mom had saved them all those years because she had been a huge admirer of Jackie's. And just the pictures, the imagery of her in the black veil leading the funeral procession, it sort of sparked a lifelong fascination. And now that the movie's been made, I've made tilt into obsession.
Okay.
The more I learned about her, the more interested I got.
That's valid. Since you've written the movie, you should be obsessed now. Right out of college, you started working for Hardball, working for Chris Matthews.
I did. Chris gave me my first job. Yeah. And Chris is, he's a Kennedy expert. He's written 2 books on them. I believe he's working on the 3rd. And so when we would travel around the country working on the show, he and I would talk a lot about the Kennedy family. And, I, again, in particular, was interested in Jackie because as the sort of most prominent woman in the bunch, she, I thought, was always being kind of pushed to the side of the main narrative. She gets written about a lot. She's been portrayed in film, on television, countless times. But it's almost always through this prism of her being a style icon, the beautiful wife. People are fascinated by her complicated marriage. But I didn't think that anyone had given her the credit that she deserved for the really substantive role that she had played in helping the country heal in the aftermath of the assassination, and also just sort of shaping the overall way we think about her husband's time in office.
So how did you and the director of the film, Pablo Larraín, decide how you wanted this movie to be different from a traditional biopic? Because it's very different.
It's very different. It is not that sort of glossy, cradle-to-grave, as you say, traditional biopic that some people might expect. I think it started right from the beginning in terms of constructing the screenplay. Rather than try to tell the entire story of her life, I wanted to focus in on one very condensed period of time. I discovered that Jackie Kennedy is the person responsible for the Camelot mythology. So a lot of people refer to the Kennedy's time in office as Camelot. I thought that had been always the case, but in fact she dubbed it Camelot in an interview that she gave a week after he was killed.
Right.
And so I was just struck by that. I couldn't believe that she had come up with it in the immediate aftermath of her husband's murder. And so I thought that would make for good bookends. His death on one hand, and then 7 days later, that interview. And so I just started mining those 7 days. And then, of course, once you're going to confine yourself like that, it helps to be able to jump around a little bit to bring other context into play. And so from the very early stages, I sort of ended up with this structure that kind of jumped around in time a little bit, but largely remained focused on that week.
My understanding is that one thing that helped you kind of with a lot of the behind-the-scenes aspects of your screenplay was the release of some previously classified material relating to the period of time right after the assassination. Can you talk about what that material was and how you even found out that it was newly unclassified?
Classified by her, yeah. It's not like there are government secrets in it, but she in death as she did in life, exercised a great deal of control over her public image. And so there were a lot of documents and notes and things, letters that she wrote that remained under seal in the custody of the Kennedy Library that have been gradually unsealed over time since she passed away. And so there's just this rich repository of oral history interviews that were done with many of the eyewitnesses. There are letters that she wrote priests in the year after of the assassination that were uncovered by some historians and other writers. So the public record kind of continues to grow as time goes on in terms of what happened during that period.
I see. So for people who don't know your history, you worked here at the Today Show for years, and you ran the 7 o'clock hour, the first hour.
I did.
And
yes.
then you left the show to pursue screenwriting full time. You wrote movies like The Maze Runner. You wrote Allegiant, which is the most recent Divergent movie.
Yeah.
And then you came back to the Today Show to run the whole darn thing. My understanding is that, and correct me if I'm wrong,
yeah.
did you write the Jackie screenplay when you were working here the first time?
No.
Or you already had...
I had already left. Jackie was the first spec script that I ever tried to write. So it was when I was first moved to LA and trying to break into the film business. And like I said, I had this idea, started when I was a kid, fueled by those conversations with Chris. And I thought, take a familiar story like this period in American history and take a figure who was pushed to the side, Jackie, and put her in the center. And so, yeah, it was the first script I ever wrote, but it was a long road in terms of getting it made.
There's so many interesting details that we see happen in this movie. Very soon after the assassination of her husband, Jackie Kennedy is shown asking what caliber of bullet it was, asking people about other presidents who were killed while in office and what do these other people know about them. How much of those details are things that you decided to create, and how many of them are things that you read about?
Yeah, it's a mix. It's definitely a mix. I mean, of taking the two that you mentioned, I don't think she ever asked what caliber of bullet was necessarily, but she was in the hours and days afterwards certainly walking around in a sort of stunned grief. She was, I think we would probably today say she had PTSD. I mean, obviously
Sure.
The trauma of sitting next to somebody who's been killed in that violent fashion. But the idea that she was, exercising, that she was really interested in controlling what the funeral would look like, and telling people to go research what Lincoln's funeral looked like so that she could mimic it. That is all rooted in historical fact. She was conscious from the very beginning of the fact that this was the last opportunity that she would have to determine how people thought of her husband, remembered her husband. And it's incredible to me that she, in the midst of this horror, had this incredible inner strength and fortitude that allowed her to do these things. I mean, you think about it, she, again, witnesses her husband's violent murder, has to go home, has to shepherd two young kids through the tragedy of losing their father, has to physically vacate her residence, didn't know where she was going to go, how she'd support herself, and she's surrounded by men who have been traditionally rather dismissive of her, not accustomed to taking her all that seriously, and yet she navigated that week in such a way that she was able to determine exactly what that funeral would look like, exactly how her husband would be remembered, and she did so just with this steely determination, and so, it's pretty remarkable.
I don't know if you were on the set of any of the filming or if you were shown early footage, but what was it like the first time you saw Natalie Portman in the Jackie hair, makeup, and costuming? It must have blown
it's
your mind.
stunning. Yeah, the whole thing blew my mind. I mean, seeing her in costume, seeing the set of the White House that was built on the soundstage outside of Paris, and they built it as an exact replica because we blended archival footage with stuff that Pablo shot. So yeah, you're walking into, obviously for any writer to kind of walk into a world that has only existed on the page up until that point is pretty mind-blowing.
My favorite stuff in the movie is the scenes between Natalie and Billy Crudup playing the journalist.
He's great too. Yeah.
And I'm fascinated by it because in my career I've done print interviews, that became magazine articles, and then I've done on-camera interviews. And there's a big difference between an interview that's just you and the subject, just with a tape recorder, and when there's cameras around.
Yeah.
What did you want to get across in the scenes between her and Billy Crudup? Because they do have some tension in them a lot.
Yeah. We wanted those scenes to represent the way that Jackie related to journalists and historians throughout her life. That character is a composite character, and whenever she would talk to journalists or writers, she would again exercise this extraordinary amount of control over what they would print. So if you go back and look at some of these unsealed notes and documents, you'll see whole sections that are actually still redacted.
Wow.
And if you listen to the tapes of her conversations with Arthur Schlesinger, there are multiple times where she'll just say, stop the tape. And so of course that just begs the question, what was she talking about during that period of time that she didn't want revealed? So there is this kind of cat and mouse game between between her and the journalist that Billy Crudup plays, of him obviously trying to paint a portrait of her version of events in Dallas and the aftermath, and her wanting to get this very specific message out about how she thought her husband's presidency should be thought of.
I think for some viewers of this movie, particularly older viewers, the movie can be jarring because it flies in the face of the Jackie Kennedy they're used to seeing and reading about, the kind of figure of grace and all of that. This presents her as a tougher woman, definitely. Is that something you thought about? Was that something you were at all worried about?
No, I think, I think it comes back to, real people are complex, layered characters, always. And, Jackie, I think, has been sort of historically put in this box of being this, porcelain doll debutante. And I think there was a side of her that was very polished. There was a certain fragility to her. She certainly had a level of decorum that particularly women of that period. She's a woman of the 50s in many respects. So that was part of her. But beneath that surface was that steely determination, was somebody who had the same range of human emotions that anyone has, anger, resentment, confusion, grief, you name it. And so again, trying to present a rich portrait of an actual woman as opposed to just an icon, and that's the whole point of the film.
What's it been like for you now in these last couple of months as the movie's coming out and you got Natalie Portman to come on the Today Show? Congrats on that booking.
Big booking. Yeah, it took a lot of doing.
But your anchors are also talking about the movie because they've seen it and they like it. Is it weird for you? How do you guys deal with it? Do you want them to kind of do full disclosure? This movie was written by our boss. Like, how does
it's a little? It's definitely, there's certainly a layer of awkwardness to it. Everyone has been incredibly kind and generous about their support for it, and I'm very grateful to them. I guess we deal with that. I sort of recuse myself from the programming portion of that, saying but everyone has been just very nice about it. So.
Did you give Matt Lauer any behind-the-scenes scoop in advance of his interview with Natalie Portman?
All kinds of dirt. Yes, he didn't ask. He didn't ask.
He knows.
But not that I have any to give.
Okay. Now, so listen. You run this incredibly successful and popular TV show. You've written this acclaimed film. You've written a New York Times best-selling book. What's another talent that you have that we might not know about? Do you juggle?
I do juggle. I'm an incredibly talented juggler.
Really?
No, I'm just kidding. I'm not that talented, but I can juggle. 3 balls, sometimes 4 if I'm really calm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the last question, just to make us all feel good out there, what's something you're just horrible at?
That's a long list.
Let's hear it.
Let me think. I'm terrible at cocktail parties. I can't fix a flat tire.
Okay.
My sense of fashion it requires a lot of outside influence in order to stay on track. Terrible athlete. Make bad food choices on a regular basis. Okay. You can stop me at any time.
No, I actually like this because it just makes me feel a little bit better because I'm thinking of all the things that I can't do and looking at.
And I'm tone deaf. I can't sing.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah. Well, I congratulate you. You wrote a really fantastic movie, and I'm glad it's getting some acclaim.
Thank you so much. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks.
I'm Dave Karger. That's been Noah Oppenheim. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks, Periscope and Today Show for having us. See you soon.